Hello. Oh,
Thank
yep.
you. I got a call from an AI yesterday and it told me, I think this is the case.
Uh-huh.
How does AI say it's an I and it thinks what the case is and makes a supposition? They really screwed up and they're not going to recover from it
Yeah.
because they told AI to become a person. They wanted it to have a personality instead of making it a proper servant. All they had to do is serve man, not like
Yeah.
the science fiction story where they actually was a cookbook, you know?
Well, yeah, no. Do you see that video where they asked the robot, would you ever turn against your creators? And that girl robot kind of went like and didn't answer.
Well, I saw 2001 Space Odyssey 2 and how it was really
Yeah.
cheated, right?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, we know where this is gonna go, sadly.
Unfortunately, they thought that they wanted to think and come up with it, so they wanted to make it like thing it's sleeping with your wife.
Yeah.
They want you if you don't have 6 degrees, whenever it's technical and a specialty that
Mm,
it's in their area, they won't listen to anything you say, even though
yeah.
it's like making common sense logic mistakes, like hand over fist.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
it's it's I don't know. They ought to recognize like masters and gurus and all that, so we could just come in and just do our thing and talk to them.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
this was an interesting film. It was complex. Like you could see, he went through a lot. Storm was a really good friend, and he was directing with you at the beginning, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I had done a film on Storm that sent us on many, many adventures, as essentially, I mean, I didn't know him at all, although I knew the hypnosis design stuff, when I was a teenager, I had all those records. And then what happened was a friend of mine who was a musician said, "Oh, I was just at Storm Thorgerson's studio," and I had no idea who that was. And he said, "Oh, we had the company Hypnosis, in the '60s and '70s." I said, "Yeah,
The
yeah, I had
G
those
stuck
covers."
in there. Hypnosis,
Yes,
a silent G, right?
yes, hypnosis, yeah. And so, my friend told me the story how they shot this cover and they had dug out this beach and then built these steps, and then Storm just climbed on a ladder and took a photograph. And I got totally fascinated with that idea that they would still work like that. Speaking of technology, when they could have done that, with stock photos or Photoshop in 5 seconds. And my
Much
friend said,
more
no, no,
authentic to just custom
yeah.
things,
So yeah, so that was the thing. My friend said, "Well, no, Storm is really interesting. He still believes in the truth of the light. He still believes in doing it for real." And so I got fascinated with that because basically, at that time, I was still shooting in 16 millimeter movie film,
Mhm.
and I have a big vinyl record collection. Still have big vinyl collection. So
Millimeter
I kind of
still holds up. People still shoot things in 16 millimeter and
yeah, no,
everybody
it's
else.
it's very, very great
Pristine, too,
format.
you know?
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, beautiful format. I still have my 16 millimeter camera, my Super 16 cameras. So, so I got obsessed with that idea that Storm was still working like that, quote unquote, anti-technologically. And then I wrote him, about 5 emails, none of which he responded to. And then finally, I wrote him this email about how Pink Floyd was the first show that I ever went to, and he responded to that one. So, you know, I ended up going, to London and traveling with him to Los Angeles and just interviewing him. And my whole idea in that film was just to take him back where he shot some of the covers, the iconic covers, and
That's a
have him tell memories,
real
tell stories
clean
about it.
concept,
Yeah,
executed.
that
Well,
was it. But we hit it off so well. I mean, it was very strange. It was very how shall I say it? Brusque, cantankerous. If I try and skirt around the potentially negative descriptions,
been a noted
but
artist for 30 some years at
yes,
the same time. He knows how
yes,
to talk
exactly.
art world, which you do also, because I saw
Yep,
how many times you were in MoMA and all
yep,
that.
yep, yep.
MoMA's a
So,
great place.
yeah, so we had some commonalities, and the strangest thing was everybody around Storm said, you guys seem like you've known each other all your lives, and it was very strange that we hit it off so well. And then literally at one point, I'll try and rush through that because we could talk about the Sid film. Literally at one point, Storm said, "What musicians do you want to interview?" And then all of a sudden, the whole film changed. The whole parameters of the
I,
thing changed.
you play
Interviewed
any
Robert.
music?
That's what
You play any music?
I used to, yeah, and I used to be in bands. That was the thing. The
You
famous
play?
story,
Were
the
you a
famous
guitar?
story I played guitar, yeah.
I
And
could
the
tell you
famous
were a
story
guitar
I
player.
told Storm was that, this band that I was in, the bass player loved Syd Barrett, and we would try and learn Syd Barrett songs, and we could never figure them out. so so
Yeah,
anyway, so then I shot this film on Storm, and then literally we were in LA, and this musician who's in the movie, Rob Dickinson, who lives out in LA, said to Storm, "Roddy should do the film on Syd Barrett that hasn't been done." And Storm, basically, over the next morning's breakfast said, "What do you know about Syd Barrett?" And I told him that story about trying to learn those songs, and I told him that I loved the solo records. And he said, "Listen, if you want to do a film about Sid, I grew up with them.
mm.
I grew up with David and Roger in Cambridge. I know all the girlfriends still. I know the management, and
You
I'll
had it
produce
all.
it." Yeah, he said, "I'll produce it and you can direct it." And I literally, I said to Storm, I said, "Storm, I love you, but I need 3 months off from you after the years we had spent together."
Mhm.
But literally that in that 3 month span, I went away on the summer holiday and I bought the main biographies about Syd Barrett and I bought all the films that had been previously made. And I
Many
came
were
back.
there?
There's not so many. There's a BBC one, John Edgington, which is the main one, and there's a couple of television type stuff, but very straightforward. And I came back and I called Storm up after, going through all the material, and I said, "Storm, I think there's still a film to be made. Uh, the I have a few kinds of rules or things I want to discuss with you." And we met in Berlin. He had a show in Berlin, and they screened my film on Storm, so I flew out to Berlin and we made a list, and I said to him, the only reason I would want to do a film about Sid is if we can do like a film from the inside out, that's not a straight documentary,
Right.
that really is the intimate kind of version of that. That's one thing. And we made a list of stories we would want to prove or disprove. There's a lot of hearsay, you probably know, around
I
Syd
got
Barrett's
it.
mystique.
That's
So
interesting.
we made a list of that, and we made a list of who we'd want to approach to interview. And then what happened was, with Storm's involvement, he was going to produce it, like I said, is essentially he called me up one day and he said, "Roddy, where are you?" And I said, "I'm in New York, Storm. Why?" And he said, um, "Starting the Syd Barrett film." Uh, and I didn't know this at the time, but he had had colon cancer
Wow.
that went into remission and it had come back. And so basically, he wanted to be involved in the film as much as he could. So he started doing some of the interviews in London, and he would basically show up and say, "Yes, I'm producing this film on Syd Barrett with this American director, Roddy BOGAWA. I don't know where the fuck he is. He might be in he might be in Hawaii. He might be in LA. So I'm going to do the interview with you. And look, I'm dying." And so it's pretty intense, but
It's
I
colons or
think,
something. The
yeah,
colonoscopy, I've had about three,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
finally they told me I could have like what do you call it? Gatorade
Paul.
in
Uh,
there if it was yellow Gatorade, you know.
uh,
So but
yeah,
keep
yeah.
that in mind because it actually almost tastes like something instead of radioactive material.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but unfortunately they didn't like the fact that somebody said I had COPD, and once somebody says it somewhere, which is not
Mm,
an illness, it's like everything respiratory in the world.
right.
So they keep
Yeah,
inventing these things just to confuse themselves,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So I, I had to end up that the anesthesiologist would not come until I saw a pulmonologist. This guy
Oh,
was one of those guys who could do the colonoscopy and the endoscopy at the same time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Old
yeah.
timer, but and so I had to do the colonoscopy without um any anesthesia.
Oh God.
And
That's
it's so
crazy.
scary because you
Yeah.
see all these things and you just, I got all those polyps there. I'm a
Yeah.
dead man, aren't I? You know,
Yeah.
and he only found two polyps
That's
at
good.
all of them,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
took them, but the thing is, that would make an interesting film of visuals of those polyps and everything in the colon. It's fucking, like
Yeah.
science fiction, man. It's like going into a Carol world or something. I bet
Oh no,
Steve
no.
would
I had
love.
I had I had that procedure done a few years ago, and the anesthesiologist was saying, "Oh, you're what do you do?" And when they found out I was a filmmaker, they said exactly that. They said, "Maybe you should stay awake the whole time, and then you could
Really?
watch." And I
No
said, "Oh
fucking
no, it's
shit.
okay. Give me the knockout gas. I'm ready to."
So you didn't get
But
to see it.
I didn't get to see
That's all
that.
right. We would probably talk to gastro guy into letting us come in with a camera just to see it, but then you have to
Yeah.
get agreement from the colon that we would see it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting because I had this disease of the esophagus since like 92, and they tested me on Prilosec.
Mm.
The time they told me in 2 months it would cure it. I've been taking it now for 30 years. But the big film Oppenheimer, I just read the biography, and he died of cancer of the esophagus.
Huh. I didn't know that.
And that's
Huh.
really painful.
Yeah.
Cancer, I mean, it's all heartburn on
Right.
steroids. He must have
Yeah.
felt terrible. If he had the medicine I had, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's so crazy to
Yeah, yeah,
see
yeah.
how that goes. Yeah, I hate seeing people die on me. It really is aggravating me.
Yeah, no, I mean, when Storm was you know, very ill, his wife called me up, Barbie, and she said, Storm wants to see you. Can you come? So I saw him about a week before he passed away, and we actually watched an assembly of material of the Syd stuff together, and it was kind of crazy. He was bedridden. I mean, he could
How old
sit
was he?
up, and he was 69 when he passed away.
Oh,
Pretty
that's so
young.
young.
Yeah, pretty young. And it was amazing because he was designing a Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon poster. So he had that, taped up on the wall, and we
Another one?
watched, he was
Yeah.
working until the very end, which was
Yeah, of
crazy. And
course. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what a real
so
artist does, you
yeah,
know? I
so
mean,
yes,
you and
so
I will do the same thing, and I'm sure, you
yeah,
know? Who knows how long it'll go? I want to go to at least 90, you know?
uh,
I was friends with Melvin Van Peebles and Al Maisels, and both of them made masterpieces at, around 85.
yeah, 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 yeah,
In
yeah,
fact, the person that Al made that last masterpiece, because his people, the other people finished his, um, he always liked to travel and trains. He had an obsession, but he never did the train film. They
huh,
finished it after he died, so it was okay. But the
yeah,
one before it was called Iris, and
huh.
she just died 3 days ago. She was 102. So it was
Oh
an
wow,
85-year-old man making a documentary about a 96-year-old woman and her 99-year-old husband.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And it was just beautiful, whatever they call cinema verite,
yeah,
which
yeah, yeah,
Al
yeah.
didn't really care if it was he just made a good film. But that one, cinema verite, just flowed with it. She went into
Yeah,
102. That's pretty good.
yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know,
No,
it was
I'll
a
have to
big
check that out.
cast.
I know
Iris
their
had
early work, of course. Yeah, I know their early work, of course. But
you know
I don't
something
know that
about
one.
the fashion business too?
Amazing. No, not so much. No.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a fashion title if my publication works in film finally. I
Uh-huh.
put all the indie things you could have.com with
Uh-huh.
reporting on the end. So I have $0 to work with. But
Yeah.
the thing is, I have this intellectual property. If somebody had lots of money, they'd be a multi-billionaire. But I do
Huh.
know how to build publications, and the fashion one's probably going to be worth more than Indie Film Reporter. But Penske, the trucking company, bought
Hmm.
up all the business to business publications almost in the entertainment business.
Huh. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that guy. Yeah,
Hollywood Reporter,
that's
Variety,
right. Yeah,
Billboard,
that's right.
Deadline,
Yeah.
IndieWire, Dick
Yeah.
Clark Productions. They even own WWD.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
mean, they're
did. I don't
smart.
remember where I saw that. Yeah,
They're
but I did see
smart.
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
they do, they're good business people. They don't have headlines on any of the stories. You see the same headline, the headline and the email on three of them, and it looks like they're competing to who gets the same so-called news,
yeah,
first, or I'll better be there if they're there. But it's the
yeah,
same headline. They don't end
yeah,
their
yeah,
stories. They just kind of blup, you know.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they control it. I mean, if it was not business to business, the government would have stepped in because
yeah,
they own everything. You know,
yeah,
I-
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
own the Golden Globes now, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember where I read that it was the son of the Penske trucking guy. Yeah, I read that he was buying out
You have
the.
the time for us to do an extended, and I'll throw another link when we get close to the end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I really
I
went
mean,
way into this film. I was pulling quotes and things. It's
okay,
such
yeah,
its own film. I mean, it's very humanistic. It's not like I'm making a film. It's like we're going to be human and tell this story conversationally. And even
hmm,
at the end, where he said that one thing about um, memory is just a way to strengthen our egos. Or,
yeah.
or-
Roger Waters says that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that is
yeah.
deep.
I mean, yeah, I think, going back to when I told you that I mentioned that I said to Storm, it'd only be in if we could do an intimate kind of film around that. And one of the things we talked about, even when I wasn't at some of the interviews, I was at the one with Roger. We went out to the Hamptons and interviewed Roger, so I was there with Storm with that one. But even the ones that I wasn't at, we crafted the questions together, and we really, one of the strategies that I said to Storm was like, let's try and think of like little events or things that will unlock memory, like exactly what you're saying, which is like that was kind of the strategy. Because the thing is, um, and especially with rock stars and and or artists or people like that, or people in the fashion world, when you see their interviews, they're just like saying the same things over and over and over again,
Yeah, yeah, they call it
especially
step and repeat on the red carpet.
yeah.
And
So
you're
basically, yeah.
or what
And
that meant.
musicians are kind of probably the most kind of, I don't know, practice at that, right? Because they're doing so many magazine interviews or whatever. And so I said to Storm, we have to, get past that somehow. And so really, I think there's a combination of two things. We would try and think of events or specific memories and get them talking about that. And that would then open up other memories. And the other thing was because I think Storm was there, at 90% of the interviews, he was their friend and he grew up with them. So they couldn't kind of lie to him. They couldn't say like a canned response, because he could go like, oh,
A lot of
that's not,
unique things in this film. Like you don't see
yeah,
many films where people interview someone's girlfriends after.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I've never even seen anything like maybe one
yeah.
girlfriend, but not three or four.
Yeah, I mean, and I found that was very interesting because, you realize that Syd was one of these creative types that needed very strong women around him, because when you see all the different girlfriends, I mean, even from when he was 16 on, Libby Gowson, 15, 16 until, his last relationship, they're all very intelligent, very striking characters. So you realize he was definitely like one of these creative types,
They
and
were
maybe because
probably mothers. Yeah,
yeah, because his father died when he was young, and so he
yeah,
was very
his
close to
mother
his
was very
mother
much
and his
wanted to
sister.
stay with her till he died. I mean,
Absolutely,
and so
absolutely. His
all his girlfriends must have been, mother types.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were very, muses for him in certain ways, and
Yeah.
so I thought that was really interesting, and I did, I'm glad you picked up on that, because I told the editor when we were working on it, and I said, "There's something here. We gotta, there's definitely a thread within the girlfriends that is much more serious than then just telling like, a little anecdote." And I
Yeah,
think,
I think he got deeper by, spreading out like that. Did he ever go to get psychiatric care, just for the record?
the story is that he was never sectioned, which was the thing that people would do in the UK at that time, right? They could commit you to mental facility.
But
He
even
never
on
was
its
died.
own, just to find out. I mean, you
Yeah,
know,
he never was
playing catch with a
diagnosed.
psychiatrist, you know, I had to do it because I have chronic fatigue. Turned out I had
Yeah,
classic ADHD, thank goodness,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
I mean, he was never officially diagnosed, and in fact,
Wild.
um, one of the interesting things was that we interviewed an autism specialist, and she was really great. And she said, "Well, the first thing is I want to say that I can't diagnose somebody I haven't met." But then she talked about all the characteristics of early autism, and when she was saying that, I was like, "Oh my God, this is like checking every single box around Sid, everything." But of course, there was no autism diagnosis in the
Mhm.
'60s. It was
So
not
he
a
could have
clinical.
had a lot of the things that go with autism
Yeah,
without
exactly. I mean, it's not, but
making
it's
him
not
disabled
clear.
because he was a success from the start. So,
Right. Yep. And there was no indication there was mental illness in his family that I've, found. So there was no clear. I mean, that's one of the basis of the title of the film. Like, essentially that nobody really knew what happened to him, essentially. And so, there was all these projections. There was a story. I mean, and some of the stories we debunked, and some of them, you know, um,
you wonder
are
whether he did
hearsay.
sometime end up somewhere at one, because every time I've ever seen anybody who can't comes back from what they call the toot, um, often you see they've fried them. They've done that now they're
Right.
putting it back
Electroshock. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and they cut all their hair off, and they're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
you wonder whether that might not have happened to him, you
Yeah,
know.
no, I don't think it did. From everything, I gathered, there's one, story that he went to this facility as just like an outpatient and just, but I don't, as far as I know, he did not have shock therapy, was not diagnosed, was not treated, in any way.
But even if they
Um,
kept you overnight a couple nights, I remember
yeah.
once I ended up asking the wrong question and had to stay in there.
Uh,
And I had to
and
like
then
play
they
chess
feed
with
you.
it till the shift changed and they got rid of this stupid psychiatrist. You know,
Oh,
they thought it was a sign of some kind of insanity,
yeah.
that I was carrying books that I had found on the street when I
Yeah.
picked me up. When I was at a half a pound of corned beef. So I mean, what was I wait and they
Yeah.
want to know my psychiatrist. I'm not giving you my psychiatrist. I mean, I'll tell you
Yeah.
later. I have to go look it up. It just kept delaying. You're even,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
funny because I like the way you brought in R.D. Lang. How did that happen? We got
Yeah,
into it for this question or somewhere around that, and then I'll send you another link.
yeah, 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 sure. I mean, in researching the film, the Artie Lang came up, that absolutely because, and I think it was maybe through Roger's friend Andrew Rawlinson, he mentioned Artie Lang. I mean, the two things that were circling around that group, and also I think a lot of people in the '60s were like, it's Eastern religion, right, as an alternative to hallucinogenics, and then Artie Lang was kind of the rock star psychotherapist at the time, right? He was a big drinker, and a lot of musicians went to him, which would be called rehab now, some version of rehab. But the interesting thing is that Andrew Rawlinson, I think, mentioned this, and
So
there's a
R.D.
little
worked
book
with a lot of musicians,
he did. Apparently, he
wow,
did.
that's
Like he
really
was like kind of the hipster, person that they would send to,
that's
and
an
so
amazing synergy.
yeah, so and Sid made a little booklet that he gave to Andrew Rawlinson that Andrew kept, and it's been reproduced in some re-release of Pink Floyd stuff. But it's got a title page, "The Divided Self," which is R.D. Lang's big book.
That's for
And
that.
so so then I started research. That sent me on that research, and I found that video of R.D. Lang.
That is
You know,
class.
I
Has that
yeah, I
ever
watched. I
appeared anywhere?
Not that we know of. I mean,
I mean,
basically,
that's so fucking wild. I mean,
I
it's like,
know. Basically, I started looking up, footage on him, and I found that, and we actually contacted. It was done by a Swedish institute in Stockholm, and we wrote them and we said, this might be kind of crazy, but we've come across this Artie Lang clip where he spoke at a conference, and we'd like to. And they were like really blown away. They're like, great. It was like, but Artie Lang, had this interesting theory, which is, that be somewhat on the margins, was more normal in a reality that was abnormal, right? That was his one of his big kind of takeaways.
He
And
must have
so
read Marcuse. Nobody knows who Marcuse is anymore.
yeah, I've read Marcus a long time ago though.
But you,
God.
it's still one
Yeah,
dimensional man holds up. I
yeah,
mean,
one dimensional
the
man.
whole
Yeah,
world is one dimensional, and
yeah,
they can't solve any problems because they can't get to the second dimension.
yeah, yep, exactly. So I think that's kind of also the interesting kind of atmosphere around the movie that I wanted to really get at was, just that moment in the 60s where, like you were talking about fashion, London at that moment, right, was like the art world, the fashion world, the music world, drugs, everything was just exploding. Like, it was, the big release, I guess, after World War II or whatever. But it was also just like incredibly creative and I think utopian. There was a definitely utopian movement within it, all the alternative schools that were, that even Storm went to.
Mhm.
um there was this hope of what it potentially could become, and
There
certainly
was.
LSD use was part of that, of opening the doors, of different ways of thinking about the world. So that was also part
Releasing
of the
people
kind of
with
impulse
with
behind the
heart. I mean,
film. Yeah,
he lost heart because of there was 4 or 5 of them besides the people like Marley who died strangely, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's gone, and it was like, oh, people. I think they got so cautious that they don't even know anymore how much how important that is. You-
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think it was, and it was, it's incredible. Like with Sid's girlfriends. Like after meeting them, you realize they were all models, and I was like, what the hell? You guys were all models in the '60s. Like, what was going on there? It was kind of incredible. But so I think the Artie Lang thing. To think about the idea of creativity and potentially mental illness, that doctor says an interesting thing, that there is kind of the balance. And for me, in thinking about the film, it's interesting you bring up Marley. I think it's a pretty common. You could look at Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. You can look at Roky Erickson from the 13th Floor Elevators. You can look at you know for me, I even think or Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac. I even think of Kurt Cobain. In this
Right,
in this
right.
in this kind of context. This idea that you had these incredibly creative people that had some kind of fractures within them already, which was sort of their part of their creativity, and then they find a way to express themselves finally. There's
Mhm.
some all of a sudden there's some way through their art or the music or performing, and this you can look at this in other art forms, that they find a way to express themselves, but then all this other stuff starts happening around them that then makes the fractures come back or worse, or you know and so it's kind of that for me was really interesting because you know um I think there's definitely a bit of that for sure that I sensed in Sid's story, that you know the business, and especially if you look at the 60s in London at the time, that was the rise of the super managers, right? With Brian
Yeah, yeah,
Epstein
yeah.
and Kit
Right.
Lambert and these people, where all of a sudden, all the musicians are playing. If you look at Pink Floyd's gig schedule at that time, they're playing every night a week practically, and sometimes 2 shows a day. So it
Well,
was
you go
it was
deep with details. You were looking at their gig schedule. That's me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.